Thank you very much. Prokopios being on time, we have 5 minutes for questions. Yes.
First, thank you for that presentation. That was fantastic, very informative. There is, as you mentioned, high degree of confusion amongst purchasers of oil onto what has high phenolic content and all of that. Has there been any effort to commercialize the oil as a supplement, specifically, instead of as a food in a supermarket?
Well, yes, it is. It's already now in France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. There is an official legislation about the use of olive oil as a food supplement with specific levels. It's an effort that has been started 3 or 4 years ago from a pharmaceutical company that has established now the requirements for olive oil as a food supplement for the cardiovascular system. And now you can find in several European pharmacy stores, you can find olive oil as an official food supplement, not just as a healthy food with a health claim in the supermarket. The pharmacy stores, food supplement. Probably the next years you will see real medicines coming from olive oil.
Prokopios, thank you. I'm amazed you got through so many slides so quickly and so coherently. It was fantastic. So I think you just answered my question. To merchandise the high phenolic olive oil, do you foresee a place on the shelf in the pharmacy? And I guess the answer is yes. Okay, that makes sense to me.
Of course, the supermarket, the general olive oil consumption with a health claim on the label in Europe, at least, it's a very nice perspective. But I feel that the future for the very high quality and the very expensive olive oils is in the pharmacy stores. And we're talking about prices which are 10, 20 times higher than the price in the supermarket.
Okay, Walter.
Thank you for that very informative presentation. One question is this NMR technique and methodology useful for measuring these polyphenols, these specific polyphenols in plasma or serum? Have you run those samples?
No, not for plasma serum. It's not so sensitive. For the plasma serum, we are using other techniques like the LCMS. And by the LCMS method, we have measured the metabolites of oleocanthal, even reaching the brain. But with the NMR, you can go down only until the levels that are found in the olive oil.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your lecture. I really enjoy it. But I always ask, are you able to differentiate the effects of oleocanthal than other similar products like oleacin or oleuropein in clinical trials? Because I think it's really a mix.
Well, it's a complicated task, indeed. What we have done a small trial with just 10 people. We gave them a high oleocanthal olive oil and a high oleacin olive oil. The total phenolic content was the same. Everything was the same except the ratio of oleocanthal and oleacin. And oleocanthal gave better results than oleacin regarding the platelet aggregation. Just one trial with one observation. Probably in other measurements, the results will be different. But it means that every compound has a different type of activity. So we have a lot of work to do in the next coming years.
Two quick questions. So the first one, you said that for the olive oil to have very high polyphenol content, they have to be harvested earlier. So does this mean that the oil production will be reduced when they're harvested earlier?
You may have, if you harvest earlier, for example, in Europe, if you harvest in October or September, you may have a 50% reduced yield, but you may achieve 3, 4, 5 times higher phenolic content.
There is a trade-off between the oil production and the amount of polyphenols. And my second question is regarding the uniqueness of the polyphenols in extra virgin olive oils versus polyphenols in other plant-based foods. As you know, the dark chocolate people claim that they have the best polyphenols. The coffee people claim that the polyphenols in coffee have the strongest anti-inflammatory effects. And how do you, differentiate or compare, contrast of different type of polyphenols in different plant-based foods?
Well, what I can say is that the specific phenols, not polyphenols, in fact, chemically speaking, the compounds that we find in olive oil are not polyphenols. They're just simple phenols, or or biphenolic compounds. But it's just from a chemical point of view. What I can say is that the compounds that we find in olive oil are so unique that you cannot find them in any other type of food, not even in the olive fruit. The olive fruit does not contain oleocanthal or oleacin. It contains precursors that during the crushing and the malaxation of the olive fruit in the mill, they are transformed to oleocanthal and oleacin. It's something really unique. You cannot find it in any other type of food in the whole planet. So I think this is the heart of the Mediterranean diet. But this is my personal opinion. It's something very, very unique. Of course, other products, you can find, for example, resveratrol in red wine. You can find it also in other foods too. But oleocanthal you can find only in olive oil, nowhere else. And this is all the persons, all the scientists around the world of olive oil should focus on what is unique. Vitamin E or oleic acid, we can find in many types of foods, but not these specific compounds.
Okay, Paul. Oh, no. Maria.
Well, thank you. I really thank you. I have learned so much here. I think everyone knows that how much I fight about the olive oil to replace any other fat in my life, first of all, in my people. I would like to ask you, Prokopios, because I know that you're all about data, and I believe all of you. Okay, olive oil is good for our health. Do we care about the environment? Because the olive oil that I used to produce when I was a kid changed today. Do we have any data about the environment about that?
You mean the impact on the environment of what? Of the production of high-phenolic olive oil? Or
the waste, whatever is happening.
let's talk a little bit about the waste. The waste is full of polyphenolic compounds. But unfortunately, you cannot find oleocanthal in the waste. It's only in the olive oil. You can find some small, very small amounts, which not, you can find other compounds, other polyphenols, but unfortunately not oleocanthal. So I'm afraid that if we want to take the benefits and the advantages of the oleocanthal, we should take care of olive oil. Of course, the wastes are a very useful source of other phenolic compounds that have other activities. And this is a direction that we should follow. I know of several efforts that have been done how to extract these useful compounds and to give value to the waste. And by giving value to the whole sector, it gives you funds to face the environmental problems. You know, if the olive oil, the price of the olive oil is €3 per kilogram, then who can find money to support the problems in the environment? But if the olive oil does not cost €3, but €10, let's say, then all the producers would take care of the waste that they produce and also of the sustainability of their olive oil, of the olive orchards.
Maria, were you talking about comparing the environment then and now in terms of phenolic production?
It's not only for phenolic production, it's for everything. Olive oil is good. We know that. I think now for so many years after we heard, Antonia and all of you. but what's happening now? Is it good for the environment? Or it's just good for our health? And what about the environment?
Antonia.
I think that Dr. Lillo may add to that, because there is a lot of evidence that the olive trees, they produce much less carbon dioxide than they use. So this, they are beneficial. The olive trees forest, they are beneficial to the environment. On the other hand, the present way of cultivating the olive trees and watering them a lot, they reduce the powers of the olives, because the olives, they contain a lot of water. And on the other hand, as you know, all these antioxidants, they protect, as the wildflowers, they have a nice smell, is for their protection against a little bit water, about the heat. So it's the reaction of the plants toward very difficult conditions. Yesterday was mentioned about, and even today, because I didn't understand very well the previous presentation in Spanish, about the olive trees which they grow in rocky areas, in mountainous areas. To me, they have the best of the best olive oil, because they are condensed, they do not have water, and then they have a lot of polyphenols. But this is another story. When I raise my hand, but I am adding to your question, Maria, but I wanted to bring to your attention, because Prokopios, in his elegant presentation, he mentioned about olives. Olives is the big absent. Always we're discussing about olive oil. Olives, they contribute a lot to the Mediterranean diet. And I wonder, of course, after mastication, if oleocanthal, we consume 5 or 10 olives, as I recommend for breakfast in Greece, and of course as a snack, provided that they are prepared in the traditional way and not being mature with caustic soda, caustic soda. So provided that they are producing, this is very, very important when we are talking about olives. So olives is a big absent of our discussion of the Mediterranean diet. And because Prokopios mentioned before that olives, they do not have oleocanthal, I wonder if oleocanthal is produced after mastication of olives. Because if you want, again, to get a very cheap way, a lot of antioxidants, have in the traditional way olives. Thank you.
All right, Teresa, I'm going to give you, but if it's something related to discussion, because I have a specific question from Prokopios for his presentation.
I'm going to be very, very quickly. A simple answer to Maria Loy. Yes, olive oils are healthy for yourself and healthy for the planet. In Spain, we have more than 25% of the Spanish production under bio and under less use of pesticides. So we are sure, and under European Union regulation, that the environmental impact of the olive oil production is less than any other fat production that could be, and have this help of the capture of CO2. So at the same time, have a reduced use of water and much more of the olive orchards. Have this high production of polyphenols. Polyphenols of olive oil are the specific claims exclusive for olive oils. And that's much important, and I appreciate a lot the presentation. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, I completely agree. And one of the things that I want to congratulate Prokopios is for his contribution with the clinical trials, which this is really what we need. And I think what he mentions is how we can define that this is specific to the olive oil. Oleocanthal is something that, distinguishes molecular signatures. So Prokopios, my question was, and this is fascinating, the results that you show with the blood cells, they're going down. Was this period of time that was also chemotherapy included, or it was after the chemotherapy?
Well, the patients were selected at the early stage of the chronic lymphocytic leukemia, it's stage 0 and 1, where it's not necessary to have chemotherapy. So the patients are just waiting for their white blood cells to increase to a specific number. They're just waiting. And when it reaches a specific number, then they start chemotherapy. So the target is to delay this period. If you can delay this period several years, then probably it will be never necessary to start chemotherapy. No chemotherapy. Yeah, the only intervention, they changed nothing in their life, just they added 40 grams of this type of high oleocanthal olive oil in their diet every day. But before meal, not together with any other food, just to make things simpler. We don't know if the activity would be the same together with food or not. But to be sure, we preferred not to provide, to use the olive oil with other types of food together. Yeah. And also I would like to give an answer to Antonia about what she said about the olives. I think, yes, the olives, the table olives are a very, very important part of the Mediterranean diet. But the compounds that are found in the table olives are very different because during the debittering process that we follow, we're decomposing compounds like oleocanthal or oleacin or the oleuropein to simpler phenols like tyrosol and hydroxytyrosol. So the table olives are a very good source of these phenolics, which have other type of activities, also very important for the cardiovascular system. But different from what we have from the olive oil. I am sure that the combination, as we do naturally in the Mediterranean diet, everyday table olives and everyday olive oil, we take both types of compounds. And we have the complete protection that is offered by the Mediterranean diet.
That is absolutely correct. Paul, did you have a... No, Paul was one of the first to raise the hand.
So first of all, thank you. Fantastic presentation, really enlightening. So I'm the cook amongst scientists, so out of my element. The question I have is this. When you mentioned it being used as a supplement, as opposed to a food, how is the measurement done in the phenols so that someone would know what is, you know, a good high level to be using as a supplement? And then if we were to adapt that idea to regular olive oil production for the consumer, which we'll talk about later, the question is, how would we create that level of understanding? Is it always the requirement of a laboratory test to be able to do it? And how is it measured?
So talking about food supplements, the requirement is the same as in the European accepted health claim. It says 5 milligrams per day. So if you can have this 5 milligrams of polyphenols in a capsule, then you have a food supplement. Either it is together with a little bit of olive oil or without olive oil at all, just in powder form. Then you take these 5 milligrams that are required by the European Union health claim. So how you measure them, there are different ways. We have developed a method that can measure precisely one by one all those compounds by nuclear magnetic resonance with the NMR. But it can also be measured by chromatographic methods like chromatography and mass spectroscopy. So this is how we do it for the food supplement. The good thing for the food supplement is that the product is stable. You know that its capsule contains 5 milligrams. In the olive oil, the natural, the matrix of the olive oil is sensitive. So the phenols inside the olive oil have a natural decomposition by time. That's why I said in 1 year, we have a 50% average drop, unless you keep it in a very, very low temperature. And we are not used to do that. But if you pay, let's say, €50 to buy a half liter of olive oil, then okay, you can put it in the refrigerator and consume it with a with a small spoon every day. Many people do that.
Somebody else, I would also like to mention that, we have a need of determining how many of these compounds can be detected into our plasma, in our blood. All this, the analysis that Prokopios is doing is fantastic, and many other labs identifying all these chemicals. But essentially, when this is what I was telling to Walter yesterday, is the epidemiological studies have to be associated with what it is in our bloodstream, and this can be connected with the health outcomes, metabolic signals and everything. We have ways to go. And I don't know if you pay attention last night on my presentation, we have created 1,700 compounds that they're ready for mass spectrometry on liquid chromatography to be detected in human plasma. And that's what I think we should all focus on, getting some of the effects. But Prokopios has to keep going on the studies of identifying those chemicals into the olive oil. However, I think Antonia's point about olives is rather significant. And I'll tell you a few things. We all try to get rid of the bitter taste of the olives. Has anybody given a thought, why do we do that? I have to tell you, the bitter agents, phytochemicals with bitter taste, they're known to have anti-diabetic properties. Look at the bitter melon in the Indian culture. They have been used for centuries for anti-diabetic drugs. So there is a lot of things that we need to investigate in terms of the products of the olive tree. And we still have 10 minutes, Stephanos, and then.
Thank you. So first, a comment about the bitter. I think and Prokopios may have some comment on this, is that the tea made from the olive leaves may have anti-diabetic properties, among other things. But Prokopios, you spoke about how people should select the olive oil as a consumer. What about the olive? So how do we know that the olive was naturally fermented or whether it was debittered with caustic soda? What do you suggest to people?
Well, it's even more difficult. Well, let's say that there are three main types of debittering the olives. One of them, well, let's say two of them are using harsh chemical reagents that decompose the majority of the phenolic compounds. This is known in, the Spanish style and the Californian style, that are using chemicals to hydrolyze and oxidize phenolic compounds. They're very good in taste, but we have a reduction in the phenolic compounds. There is also the other type of fermentation. It is known as the Greek style, which is retaining more phenolic compounds. It is very long, more expensive procedure. It takes up to 6 months to have a fermented product, which is natural, let's say more naturally debittered, just by the use of salt to preserve from the microbial spoilage. We have observed that this type of fermentation leads to table olives with higher phenolic content. Personally, I would prefer this type, but of course it's something very complicated, because from economic point of view, it's very difficult to make big production of these types of table olives. And a few words about the diabetes. What we also observed with the patients with leukemia. The leukemia patients, they have their glucose levels are dysregulated. When they started consuming the high oleocanthal olive oil, for all of them, it was amazing, all of them, their glucose levels came back to their normal levels. It was an observation. We don't know the mechanism, we know nothing. But it's an observation that it was included in the publication.
This is amazing, especially, I think you should follow up on that, especially in diabetes. So my recipe for fermenting the olives is put them in seawater. I have Javier first. I'm sorry, he's been waiting. Javier?
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the point that Maria was making about the environmental impact of olives. I've worked with multiple crops around the world, and hands down, once I started working with olives, there is no comparison on the way it's grown and the resources that it uses. And in addition, conservation of soil and being able to grow it in marginal soils, where you have very limited resources. Now, one thing that I note that we haven't discussed and other crops are doing is, this is a really good example. There is a label being developed right now for water use. And I haven't seen these in any of our discussions in many of the conferences that we've gone. We haven't discussed these, but other crops are. The only way of recognizing a more sustainable practice right now that affects price and that gives a premium to the farmer is the organic seal. Now, if we were to develop standards for being able to use those marginal soils, the water use, now you're going to start to see these in the coming years when you buy a product that has 1 drop of water, 2 drops of water, 3 drops of water, depending on the amount of water it uses. And this is something that we should really start to develop and talk about the environmental impact, but not only with water, but also with all the other different advantages that we can have in an olive crop.
Thank you, Javier. Joe?
Thank you. I want the idea of the high phenolic olive oil it intrigues me very much as a medicine, effectively. But it runs counter to what we've talked about so much, is that yum factor, right? Because the high phenolic olive oil doesn't taste good. It just doesn't taste good. So I guess my question is, I'm wondering, would it make sense to create a standard, not a health claim, but a standard for what constitutes high phenolic olive oil? As opposed, as I said, as opposed to a health claim. Because with a health claim, yeah, of course, it's a difficult thing to obtain. But if you control the name, because you could say high phenolic olive oil, that means somebody's going to think it's healthy. And what we're seeing in the U.S. is a lot of misleading advertising. You and I have discussed this about oils that are claiming to be high phenolic. Just saying that implies health claim. But if we can regulate the standard, maybe we can prevent that.
Well, it is very interesting that we have reached that level. When we started working with the phenolics 10 years ago, nobody was talking about this. So it seems that year by year, things are moving forward. So I think, yes, it's the time to define this. Just last year, we made the first publication, first effort about the definition of the high phenolic olive oil based on large-scale statistical data. So based on the results from 6,000 olive oil samples, and based on the distribution of the phenolic content that we have measured, and based on the rate of decomposition during storage, we came to the result that the best definition is every olive oil that has more than 500 milligrams per kilogram can be considered as high phenolic. The other question is, where is the end? Is 5,000 times 10,000, who knows? Well, just to share with you that the highest concentration that we have ever found in a naturally produced, very, very early harvest olive oil is close to 5,000 milligrams per kilogram. just one case in 6,000 samples. And probably we have only 2 or 3 samples per year that go more than 3,000 milligrams per kilogram. And of course, you cannot taste them. It's like poison in your mouth. It's not their use as a food, of course. So I think somewhere between 500 and 1,000 milligrams per kilogram, it's an ideal definition about the high phenolic. More than 1,000, it's difficult for the consumption, unless you're taking this olive oil for medical purposes. And there are many people that are doing that. Probably in that case, if you put this olive oil in a capsule, then you don't feel the taste, so you won't worry about the taste. But yes, based on the statistical data, I think the 500 to 1,000 is, the taste can be acceptable. For example, the olive oil that we had yesterday in the dinner or in the lunch, they are very close to 1,000 milligrams per kilogram. And they are acceptable. They're not something very difficult to consume. And they have all the health benefits. So we should find the window where we should talk about the high phenolic olive oil. Yeah.
Sorry, Walter, you have more, but I have to stop because I have to pass to Dan Flynn for the next session, and it's exactly 10:30, so I have to be on time.